ActiveCampaign Everwebinar. In this video, we're going to cover how to integrate Everwebinar with ActiveCampaign. I'm going to recommend that you have one tag and one automation in ActiveCampaign for each of the events that can occur in Everwebinar. And there's 7 events. Also, we're going to create two custom fields, one for the event that occurs, that's a text custom field, and another one for the date it occurs, and it's a date. The reason we want to use these is we want the ability to look back and see who's done what and potentially follow up with them or do something. So let's say a month from now, you want to follow up with all the people that did not purchase but stayed for at least an hour into the video. And then finally, I'm going to recommend not using ActiveCampaign to send reminders. Now, ActiveCampaign certainly can do that, and it might be okay if you only have one time of day and it's always consistent. Then you can set up some conditions that check the time, wait for a certain amount, and then send reminders. However, it becomes challenging, especially less than 24 hours before the event. ActiveCampaign doesn't have really good time capabilities like it does for date, where you can specify a custom field that's date-based and then do things relative to that. Can't do that in ActiveCampaign. Also, if you have multiple times that a webinar runs, you're going to have to set up quite a bit of automation to handle that. So I would rather leave that to Everwebinar and let ActiveCampaign follow up based on events. So let's dive right in. Inside your ActiveCampaign account, you want to go to, I think, lists or forms, manage fields, and you're going to create 2 custom fields. One's going to be webinar-event, it's a text input. Another one's going to be webinar-date, and it's a date-based custom field. You're going to want to create 1 tag per event. These are the events: attend, leave, miss, purchase, register, replay, stay, using whatever naming convention you have. In this case, what I'm doing is a little bit more than probably need, but I've got webinar-attend, webinar-leave, some information that's specific to this webinar. So that's why I've prefixed it with that. So whatever you do, just have a consistent naming convention, but you're going to want to have a tag for each of these events. Same goes for your automations. You're going to want to have 1 automation per event. And if you noticed, I just named them exactly the same as the tag. So it's pretty darn obvious which event or which automation goes with which tag. Now, the one that controls everything, I've got this one called controller. It does most of the heavy lifting. I'm trying to make it do most of the work so that all these other automations are relatively simple. In general, they follow up via email, and that's it. So they, again, look just like the tags. And let's dive into, actually, before we do that, let's just go to Webinar Jam real quick to show you this. Really doesn't matter what the time schedule is. This one's a just in time. It's got an instant replay, but it also plays every day at 5. So if we go and edit this, I want to look at the integrations. I've already connected ActiveCampaign to this Everwebinar account. I've got 7 rules, which corresponds with each event. So if they register, they get this register tag. If they attend, they get this attend tag. And in this case, we have if they leave before 1 hour, and also if they stay after 1 hour. You may or may not actually use this. If you don't, no big deal. You just don't need those automations in ActiveCampaign. Let's take a look at the controller automation. Like I said, this does most of the heavy lifting, if you will. And I'll tell you why I've got it set up the way I do, because I really do want to make the other related automations relatively simple. So first off, triggers. Any of the tags that get applied, we'll put them in here. So they could come in here, but looks like, so, well, you don't come in here for everyone because you're not going to get every chance. But for instance, if they register, they get the profile register tag. I set it up to run multiple times. And the reason is, if I have this running evergreen, people can come back and re-sign up again. I'm fine with that. I definitely have to have it set up this way so that that can occur. It doesn't matter which tag they get applied. They come in here, and the first thing we do is we update the webinar date custom field to the current time. So we know where they are or what date it is whenever they had that tag applied. And then we exit all the automations except for this one that are related to this webinar. So we just kind of cut them off no matter what. If they're in one already, they automatically get removed. And then we do a series of conditional checks. Do they have this register tag? Do they have the attend tag? Do they have the miss tag? And every leg, if you will, kind of looks the same, except there's some nuances here. So for instance, the very first thing we do in here is we update the custom field webinar event to register. So now we know when they registered and what they did, which is register. And then secondly, I'm removing the register tag so I can reuse it. That's why I've had this set up for multiple times, because I actually remove it so they don't have it. And then finally, we put them in this automation. That's why I call it a controller automation. It basically brings them in, puts them into another, and then this effectively goes to the end. But notice all these legs look the same. So let's go down here. So if they watch the replay, we update their webinar event custom field to replay. We remove that tag, and then we put them into the replay automation, and then we go to another action. All of these look identical. They all get pumped into this one at the end, which has a wait 1 day. And the only reason I do that is I just want to have the ability to eyeball the list of automations and see how many people there are on a per day basis. So this doesn't really do anything other than help me use my eyeballs to figure out what's going on. So I would look at, I can't do it here. Let me just back up a little to show you what this looks like. So there's a lot of symmetry, if you will. People add this tag. We set the current time to this, exit all the automations, and then we check which tag, put them down the appropriate path, update the webinar event to the event that's occurring, and then we remove the tag that got them in there, and then put them in the appropriate automation, and then wait for a day. So that is the monster controller automation for this that basically sends all the people to the appropriate step. And in general, they're all relatively simple automations. So for instance, when somebody registers, I don't do anything. I'm letting Everwebinar handle notifications. I could put some logic in that says, hey, if it's more than a day before the webinar, then send them an email. But for these, for instance, I've got, let's say this stay automation has 1 email in it. Nothing fancy here. Here is one thing I'll point I think is useful. I add a do not disturb tag at the beginning, and I remove that do not disturb tag at the end of the automation. And the reason I do that is I don't want this person who's in here to be disturbed. In other words, don't send any other emails. Now, this makes the assumption that you're respecting that tag. So for instance, if you're sending out campaign emails on a daily basis, you want to exclude anybody that has the do not disturb tag. So they're busy, they're doing something, don't interrupt them. And then in this case, we wait 3 hours. I'm going to give them a little time. So they stayed for the webinar. So give them a little bit of a break, and we're going to send an email. I think it's making an offer here. And then I want to wait for 20 hours. Now, one thing I want you to note is the time. 3 plus 20 is 23 hours. So they effectively got put in here at the end of the webinar. And I want to send an email out almost at the same time, but just a little bit earlier, because I know based on this that they were on the webinar and they should be in front or near where they can read their email. I don't want to wait too long. I don't want to wait 24 hours because that's later in time. And that, let's say the webinar was at 6 o'clock at night. It might be the time they get this, 9 o'clock. Maybe that's too late. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to check, did they open this email? If they did not open this email, send it again. I'm being aggressive here because these people have signed up, they attended. In theory, they're interested in what I have to offer. So if they didn't open, I'm going to follow up a little bit. And then I'm going to come back here and I've got my wait 1 day, just as a way for me to know how many people are in there on that day, and then do the tag cleanup. So if you keep in mind, let's just say they came in here, they got this email, they're in the 20-hour wait, and they make a purchase. If you recall from the controller automation, that's going to pull them out of here so they won't get this second email or this email again. And let's just look at the other ones that do have email. Add a do not disturb, wait some time, send this out. So this is somebody that left. And a little bit different here. I send out this first email, wait for 20 hours, send the second email. I'm not worried yet about them not opening this, but I'm going to send the second one, wait for 23 hours. was 3 plus 20. I'm a little bit earlier in the day, and now on this one I'm checking, did they open this email here? If not, resend, and then wait a day, do not disturb. So these automations are relatively simple. Where the work occurs is in this controller automation. So that's the gist of it. And all these other ones I really haven't done much. I could add something here if they attend, yay. But really what I want to know is, did they stay or did they leave? So I'm not really doing anything, but the fact that I have like a 1-day wait at the end of each one gives me a kind of a way to eyeball how many people are at those steps on a per day basis. So that's how we integrate Everwebinar with ActiveCampaign.